Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the CDP Growth Show. On today's episode, I'm joined by Gideon, who is the current VP of Marketing at DealHub. Gideon, how you doing?
Very well, thank you. Good to join you guys today.
Yeah, awesome. Now, Gideon, before we dive straight into kind of the main part of the episode, just so my audience got context, just give the audience like a really, really quick, 30-second rundown of kind of what DealHub is and then really who you guys serve with the platform.
Absolutely. So DealHub is a SaaS software.
Yeah.
We are a sales product, and our value proposition is we are CPQ, which is a configured price quotation solution. We also offer contract management, e-signature, sales proposal, and document generation. So overall, if you're to sum that up, it's a deal stack to help sales teams close more deals.
And something that I really like kind of asking my guests just to kind of understand how you kind of got into this crazy world of B2B SaaS marketing. What was kind of just give the audience like a really quick kind of backstory on how you kind of got to to where you are now in this current position.
So first of all, coming into the company a few years ago, I mean, the main challenge that I faced and that we faced first initially was the fact that everything was pure outbound. There was no inbound model right there.
Yeah.
We can talk about that more in a minute. And secondly was obviously the competition. So for example, in our space, we're competing against Salesforce CPQ, Aptus, and a few others. Each of those vendors are multi-billion-dollar companies. Salesforce has been around for 20 years, so they own at least 81% of the share of voice for organic search. And they have those guys alone have 35,000 employees at their disposal. And of course, they have the advantage that they have the CRM solution, and they can just bring in their account managers to help close the deal without any true inbound marketing. They don't even need that. How crazy is that?
Mad, crazy.
So that was the challenge. But the good news is that you don't need to have tons of money and tons of employees to disrupt the market. I think you've seen that this week. We've had an amazing achievement and announcement.
Review by G2.
Absolutely. So G2 Crowd, just a bit of context about them. They're a competitor of Gartner and Forrester in the research analysis space. The CEO was the former owner of Steelbrick, which was sold to Salesforce CPQ for $320 million plus a couple of years ago. And their claim to fame, G2's claim to fame, is the fact that they give you a real-time voice in the market, voice of customer led snapshot of the market. So who are the latest and greatest right now? Who are the market leaders and who's disrupting over the past 12 months in comparison to Gartner, who gives you like the annual snapshot, deep dive into the products and features. So one is products and features and analyst led. The other is customer led.
Yeah.
So people like you.
Yeah.
So to speak.
Yeah. Makes sense.
So the accolade, we're listed in the top 50 sales products out of all of the products in the world, coming up, side by side with like LinkedIn Sales Navigator and some other massive technologies. And Salesforce, we were 6 places above Salesforce CRM. Wow. Our value proposition is slightly different, but it's a great achievement. And also in the parallel category of customer high satisfaction, we ranked in the top 100 out of 57,000 plus companies in the world.
Yeah. And kind of, and that's obviously an awesome achievement. And, linking back to, when you first initially joined and, kind of going back to that inbound versus outbound, kind of walk us through that kind of inbound growth engine that you've built, with DealHub and how you've kind of gone about that.
Yeah, so first thing I did was analyze the outbound. So I looked through that and I looked at the volumes and I looked at what was actually truly sales qualified as opposed to marketing qualified. And then I looked at the closing rates. And I quickly learned that the sales qualified numbers from outbound of those who are in an active buying cycle now was a really low volume number. So even if you close 22%, which is a good SaaS KPI for sales teams, you don't have a growth engine that's scalable there. So so our positioning was either we are going to scale, outbound SDR exponentially, or we're going to build an inbound model. And I think that when you're going to market and you're starting with kind of SMB up, you should really start wherever possible with inbound first. And when you're starting with enterprise go to market, then of course outbound and pure ABM Makes a lot of sense. So we put the inbound in place, and that probably begs the question: how do you build an inbound engine from scratch? Like, what is your first step?
Mm-hmm.
So this is my take on it. My take on it is that you need to put in a marketing automation. Presuming you have a website, you need to put in a marketing automation first as a first step.
Mm-hmm.
That will allow you to do a number of things, including measure the behavior of the traffic, the conversion points. More important than that is the attribution. Where did they come from?
Mm-hmm.
So you can start to see which channels, which campaigns, which content assets are truly working for you.
Yeah.
Before you scale content production, paid media, and the other things that you need to do, and webinars and everything else that comes afterwards, don't do it in the wrong order. Don't spend a ton of money bringing in traffic without attribution, because you don't get to learn from that traffic. That traffic is teaching you something all of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So without attribution, you're throwing money down the drain.
Yeah.
Even though your boss, your CEO, is probably saying, "I need results yesterday." Push back. Attribution can be fully set up in 2 to 4 weeks maximum. The curve on that, though, is to know what is good attribution versus bad attribution, and that takes a little bit of experience. So of course you have kind of primary attribution of what was the original source, and then what was secondary, like maybe where did they convert most recently. Maybe that was a different channel or a different content asset or a different campaign. Ideally you want to be tracking all of that. It's not one or the other, it's as well as. You don't have to choose between things. You just have to know that you want to measure them. Once you've got attribution in place, then you can start to scale. The golden rule when creating content and distribution is, rather than spray and pray and focusing on all the channels, try to do a few channels well. Try to get that critical tipping point. Try to build up an audience. I think there was somebody very smart in B2B marketing that once said, don't focus on the impressive kind of halftime adverts on the, on whatever TV show it is. Be the TV show itself. Be the one who brings the audience back. The adverts don't bring the audience. It's the TV show itself.
It's building that network, right? That you where you own the media.
So how to do that? So how to do that from a B2B point of view? That audience that you want to build is essentially your buyer persona. So your buyer persona is not the person who signs the check at the end of the deal, of course. It's the person who carries the pain, the person who's going to be the champion, and perhaps the person, if you're lucky, who is responsible for the project as well. And you might find that most opportunities come from the same buyer persona. Most sales opportunities come from the same buyer persona, and you might need to test multiple personas to find out which is the true one. Then you kind of go on to Google search and you find out what their KPIs are for your persona, and then write your kind of KPI document for how you're going to create content speaking to those pains and be relevant to them. And the whole thing there is stop pushing your product and start helping them to articulate their problem. Once you do that, you will build an audience. If your story is only about yourself and your product, there's zero differentiation between you and everybody else that's out there.
I 100% agree. And I think when you become that channel where you're putting out consistent content that's not just, this is our product, this is what we do, it's more just content that, like you said, is just of a value and is speaking to that audience. Like you said, it's the best way to go, and it's the best way to build that consistency of people coming back and watching the content. And I think something that that we've obviously spoken about previous to this conversation has been really the piece around thought leadership and how you guys have built that thought leadership, particularly with channels like LinkedIn. So I'd be really interested, I think the audience would as well, around how you've really kind of crafted out that thought leadership on LinkedIn on the more organic side.
Right. So absolutely. So it's great. You should insist on having, in B2B, LinkedIn is probably one of the primary channels. Of course, that's why we're talking about it, because you can target people to a high level of detail, and it's so scalable. And then with your playbook, of course, you need a playbook for paid, which might split into content versus acquisition, direct acquisition. You need a playbook for your brand. And then you need, ideally, to have a playbook for the thought leaders in your company. Those would be maybe your C-level, your executive team, who would be helping to lead as opposed to manage situations. And why that's so important is in terms of permissions. So, for example, from a brand point of view, you need to keep things kind of within a guide frame. so that you're consistent, so you don't have this kind of bipolar personality of talking about everything that you can do. For example, your head of strategic partnerships might be the one who would announce your new integration with whoever, but it may not be something that you want to announce on your company website, on your kind of brand or your company profile. It may be that when you talk about leadership, it's best to do that with your CEO speaking. In situations like COVID-19, people are looking for leadership. They're looking for people who come up and say, "This really sucks right now. It's okay. You're not in this alone, and we're going to help you get through this. And when you don't know what to do, we're actually going to lead you." People are looking to be led through times of difficulty. That's natural. That's human, and that's totally legitimate. And obviously, you can see right now, people's reaction to that is, I've tested it out. When you're posting through profiles, 800% more engagement than if you're posting the same content through your company. And why is that? Because I identify with you, Joseph, as a fellow human being, because I feel that you understand me. I feel that you're personally accountable because you're a person behind that profile. And I think that you're approachable. I can name you. And also we can see, what common ground that we have, who we know in common, and everything that goes with that. I can't achieve those same things with a brand logo.
Yeah, I think that, especially like you said, during times like now, that kind of thought leadership piece is so important. Whether you're a CMO or a VP like yourself, whatever position you are really in the company, I think it's vital now that even the SDRs in the sales team are really starting to develop that kind of personal brand, if you like, on LinkedIn, because I just think it's a great way to get in front, not just get in front of prospects, but like you said, build that leadership and build that network of people.
It begs the question right there, how to build an authentic personal brand versus just building a copycat personal brand. That's a whole session in itself. I would definitely say that try to find your own unique voice. Don't try to mimic other people that you see that are kind of trending right now. In some cases, that will be very short term. It might last for a couple of weeks and then it might backfire. So definitely try to find your own authentic voice. I found that for myself, as a marketing leader, that the ability to analyze situations and patterns and to reflect and help people analyze was actually my best quality. So I just thought, how do I productize this? Well, I'm just going to share and gather learning and then share that with the audience rather than trying to be, somebody else who I really look up to. And that worked out really well. I did what I do best, and it had massive engagement numbers. So yeah, definitely find your own unique voice and think about that, because you probably do have one, whoever you are.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of people right now, particularly on LinkedIn. We've got things like engagement pods and all these different platforms that I think give the appearance that one knows what they're doing on LinkedIn. And I think it's very easy for people right now, whether it's founders, marketing leaders, to just jump on LinkedIn, like you said, post similar content to everyone else, maybe fake for engagement. And I think in the short term, that may work, right? But in the long term, it's not gonna be a winning strategy at all. And it's not.
If you're an SDR, sorry to cut over you. I apologize. I think if you're an SDR, your role is to uplift the leaders in your company. It's not to make yourself seem like you're the junior CEO of the company. So let's not confuse this whole personal branding thing. If you're in a junior role, you need to support the hierarchy and kind of contextualize why that leadership content is important to your wider audience. Is not to kind of position yourself as the kind of the next best thing, the mini leader that's been overlooked, because it's just not believable. It's not credible as a story, and people see through that. So you're working against yourself. Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot to say on that track alone.
Yeah, I think particularly now, even though I'm referencing back what I said, but I think that point of just leading people now and being that unique voice, particularly on LinkedIn now, I think it's a great time for people to be doing that style of content. So yeah, completely agree with that.
You know what what happened a couple of weeks ago when the outbreak really kicked in is I looked at all the content for a couple of days before I acted. Sometimes the best thing you can do is not try and act at the same time as everybody else. Take a step back and look, watch, and listen.
Yeah.
And I saw that 95% of the content probably fitted into just one or two buckets. There's tons of pictures of people with cats on laptops setting up their home office.
Zoom calls.
Tons of people are doing screen grabs of Zoom calls, maybe with like people doing funny faces and all of that.
Yeah.
Like tons and tons and tons of the same stuff. And none of it filled me with hope or optimism or humor or any of the things that I needed to go and tackle the situation effectively. If anything, it just frustrated me or kind of just gave that mini moment of despair of, like we're all here together and nobody has a clue what they're doing. And now we're putting that in.
I'm sorry to cut you off. Yeah. I mean, what are some, from your perspective, maybe what you've done over the last few weeks, what are some good examples of content that particularly, during times like this, that you should be using or should be tapping into?
So I tried to make this broader than just what I've done. So I would say the key value is empathy marketing. If I was to put a label on it, empathy marketing is really the core theme in the content that we've created, which is basically creating content which says, I'm not going to try and pretend that your situation doesn't exist. I'm not going to try and say business as usual, because it clearly isn't business as usual. I'll try and make this relevant to where we are today. I'll try and communicate in a way which kind of acknowledges your situation, says, I know this is really going on for you. I'm not going to use cheap buzzwords like COVID-19 and whatever else it is, WFD or WFH, and all of those things, just to kind of throw a pity party. And I'm just going to try and home in and say, I understand you, I can relate to you, you're not alone in this situation. There are practical steps that you can be taking. It's not purely about selling to you, it's about adding value to you where you are now. It's about you building trust with me or us as a brand. The number one KPI from 2008 from the economic recession back then was the companies who invested in brand marketing and building trust were the ones that came out on top after the recession was over. And the ones who tried to sell as usual were the ones who ostracized themselves from their audience because they were seen as being unempathetic and somewhat ruthless. So don't be that guy.
Be the brand. No, I agree completely. You've got to, and that, again, that point on empathy marketing is so important. You either use this time to really build the brand, and like you said, use the empathy, or you just go in and do what everyone else is doing and flog your product. And
and if you don't know how to do empathy marketing, that's okay. Start with calling your customers, speak to the people that use your product, ask them how things have changed recently, what their challenges are right now beyond just your product, and get a good understanding of what a day in a life or a week is like for them. Start with speaking to your customers. That's your obvious starting point right now. If you want to figure out how to do empathy marketing, don't bank on people and project what you think they want to hear. Understand it from the inside.
And it's just like you said, it's putting yourself in their shoes, right? It's not just trying to assume what they're going through. It's not just trying to say, okay, I think they're going through this. It's really understanding, what are they going through. Okay, how can we help, or how can we create meaningful content for that?
Absolutely.
So obviously now kind of moving more onto the more kind of techie kind of what you guys have got in place in terms of MarTech, sales tech. A lot of the kind of the audience really for this show is your kind of early stage SaaS founders, maybe early stage kind of marketing teams that look, I'm sure this as well as I do. As particularly as a new founder, you see all of these marketing softwares, you see all of these sales softwares, and it's very easy, to kind of have that trigger happy mindset and start, buying all of these different softwares, and you've, all of a sudden you've got 15 different softwares when you could have just had 3, right? So I think what would be really interesting is to really kind of see, what are like the core softwares that you guys have in place, the CRMs. I know you spoke a lot on content, some of the tools you guys have got in place for measuring that content, and really, why you've built the stack in the way you have.
Right. So a couple of points. You need to know where you're going with your stack. You need to have an endpoint in mind. You shouldn't just be doing it on the fly. If you don't know intuitively how to do that, then speak to somebody who's just a year and a half beyond where you are now.
Yeah, a few steps ahead.
Reach out to those marketing people, ask what decisions they made, ask what mistakes they made, and get their input. Most people will if they're within your geography or if you apply it, will be happy to share their learning. Most people, it empowers people, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
So know where you're going. The key thing there is connectivity. So most technologies might connect with the CRM, but the technologies might not connect with each other. So there won't be horizontal connectivity, but there might be vertical connectivity. You need to check that out when you're looking at the integrations. Don't follow trends. Don't choose somebody who's the dominant market leader for X amount of years, because by the time you get to them, there might be legacy. There might be a legacy technology that's full of bugs and all kinds of nonsense. Do your homework. You don't need a lot of technology in your first years, but what you do need to do is get ROI out of your technology. So the common kind of market statistic is that most people use 20% of the capabilities of any technology or software that they have. 20%.
Crazy. Yeah.
So you're probably buying all of the bells and whistles and add-ons and all the rest of it and the enterprise package or whatever else, and using only a fraction of that, and then thinking about the next piece of technology that you're going to use. So that's it, kind of at a high level. You can almost say a philosophical level. Now, if you want to know specifically some of the key tools that we've used, so I started with marketing automation, of course. So we used HubSpot. For a number of reasons. It's a good marketing automation, probably the best or one of the best that's not at the enterprise heavy end. It's not Marketo. Its core competency is that's what it has been for years. It's friendly not only with your website forms, your CTAs on your site. It's also friendly with, for example, it has the integration with LinkedIn marketing solutions. So you can get attribution from that. It has an integration with Salesforce, I believe Microsoft Dynamics. The core CRMs that you can feed information into. You can build out your landing pages on that. You can technically build out your website on that. You can build out smart forms, which means depending on what somebody's seen before, they can get different dynamic calls to actions based on their stage in the journey. You can do a lot with that, and the connectivity with social and social attribution with Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and various other channels allows you even to share your content from HubSpot and also analyze some of the metrics there. So I think it's strong on the marketing automation side of things. It wouldn't be my first choice as a sales tool, or necessarily even as a CRM. We use Salesforce as a CRM because that's what my previous experience was over the several years of coming in, and I need to turn things around quickly. So I did what I knew. These days, Microsoft Dynamics could also be a highly credible alternative with maybe a more competitive price point. Both of those are legitimate. For our SDR team, our sales development team, they use a tool called outreach.io, which allows them to do cadences, email sequences, segmented sequences, call dialer, integration with LinkedIn touch points, synced back to the CRM. So every touch point that we make with kind of our outbound activity, our outbound stream or cadence shows up as an activity against that lead or contact in the CRM. So we can know the total effort of touch points 360 that helped to move that lead or contact forward. So outreach would be one place. LinkedIn marketing solutions would be more of a paid channel for content and lead gen. So all of that kind of feeds back into the CRM, and attribution is the name of the game. So you want to make sure that you map from your website forms or your lead forms into your lead, map that same data all the way through to your opportunities, your contacts, your accounts, so that eventually you're not looking at top of the funnel metrics down. You want to end up looking at bottom of the funnel metrics up. So you want to reverse engineer your pipeline. The reason that you do that is that you know the true cost of acquisition. So don't look at vanity metrics like how many leads I brought. Look at your closed deals won and look at the sources of them. Look at the buyer personas. Look at your sales qualified opportunities and look at your campaigns, your content assets, your channels. Look at all of that, and at each stage work it backwards. And the ones that are working and are dominant, scale them and increase them. And the ones, for example, you might have a killer content asset that will bring you tons of marketing qualified leads, and no deals ever close. No deals ever close out of it. I have that asset. I know what asset that is. So don't scale that to get more marketing qualified leads, thinking if you call these guys more often or send them more awesome emails, they're going to get it. No, you're fooling yourself. Don't do that. Look at what actually leads to the outcome that your business desires.
Yeah, it's such a good point. I think, so many, like you said, so many, B2B SaaS companies, they focus on the wrong things, right? When it comes to, metrics, like it's always a question of how can we get more MQLs? How can we drive, 20
and there's
more
a reason,
MQLs?
It happens everywhere from small to enterprise for one core reason, is that line of business people, your leader of, for example, marketing, will be protecting their job, will be protecting their budget, and they'll be protecting their bonus. So actually, in many cases, people protect the metrics that keep them safe. It's rare that you'll have a leader who will think company first and their line of business second. But when you do have those people, that's when you create a hyper growth company.
Yeah. And obviously, this may sound like a bit of a straightforward question, but do you think that is because there is a lot of the time a lot of misalignment still between marketing and sales, and whoever is, whether it's the CRO or the CMO, do you think that is just because of a lot of misalignment between those two departments, or?
All of them are pretty much misaligned. The question is why? So beyond protecting budgets, you have to think that the KPIs that they're measured on, that they get to keep their job, are diametrically opposed to each other. So let me unpack what that means in real terms. So for example, if you're a sales rep and you accept too many sales qualified opportunities, and then you're closing, and then you only close a proportion of them that you can physically do in terms of the hours that you have, then your closing ratio falls below a certain number and you get penalized for that. If it falls too low in terms of ratios, then you get in serious trouble with your manager. Because for example, in SaaS, the market average is 22% closing rate. So if you accept 100, 120 opportunities and you're only closing, 10, 15 of them, you're getting your hand slapped. And it's a nightmare. And actually it's terrible for a CRO as well, because then you spent 10, 20,000 on cost of acquisition. When you think about labor costs, media spend, softwares and all of that, and you have a bunch of opportunities that don't close, you're throwing money down the drain. So those ratios at every stage in the funnel have to be oiled and maintained to a high degree of accuracy. So marketing and SDR are trying to push more through the funnel because that's where they get compensated. Sales are trying to push back and only accept what is truly qualified, and they're sure that they can close, what you might call cherry picking or sandbagging. And that's your gap right there between the two.
Makes sense. Okay.
And obviously you're paying commission. So as a company, you're paying commission to the SDR or commission to the sales rep. So one way or the other, you're paying out for the privilege of that. And you don't want to do that. You don't want to throw money away unless you're going to see ROI from it.
Yeah, completely agree. Yeah. And, obviously.
So that's a universal problem that's not going to change. Go ahead. Sorry.
And there's been, obviously, kind of towards the start of the call, you mentioned a lot of things around kind of, content and tracking. I mean, just there tracking the effectiveness of content, from the bottom of the funnel. Have there been any specific tools aside from HubSpot that have been kind of part of that stack in terms of tracking content?
Sure. So one that will be less familiar to you that I have used and do use is called Trend Demon. So Trend Demon is doing content journey analytics throughout your site, from first touch point to second to third to fourth to fifth. And then it can start to analyze which content assets are the best for engaging an MQL versus an SQL, or a first time visitor to the site versus a second time. You can start to analyze the behavioral patterns of both known traffic, leads, versus anonymous traffic. And if you think about it, on your average site, you'll have, for a normal site, you'll have a 1 to 3% conversion ratio. For a high performing website, you'll get 3 to 6% conversion of overall site traffic.
Yeah.
That means 94% plus of your website traffic have not been converted. And tools like Trendemon are able to help you understand how to convert more of that 94%, which is where the majority of your opportunity is.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And I think a lot of B2B SaaS companies, they don't really correctly track, like you said, the whole kind of each touch points of the content. They're not correctly tracking that. And I think that, like you said, just putting out content for the sake of content. And I think it's really, really important, whether it's an ABM campaign you're running or whether it's just, like you said, it's kind of that top of the funnel content. Go ahead.
I'll give you an amazing use case example when we use Trendemon. We had more than one solution in our portfolio, right? So we had one core solution that's well established in the marketplace. People that came looking for that, essentially, once we confirmed we had all the right things, their next action was, okay, I now want to book a demo. So this solution page was fantastic, like 33% conversion ratio. We had another solution page for something which was new to the market, and our call to action was demo. People did not convert on that page. The reason being is that it was new when they were looking to educate themselves. So what they were really looking for as a CTA was more information and more content. So even though your site structure might be each solution page has the same CTA, that doesn't respect your audience and the subtleties of how people engage with different propositions within the same site. Sounds super obvious now that I say it to you, right? But without that insight tool, we wouldn't have been able to know to treat people differently on different solution pages within the same site.
Yeah, it's that whole kind of, and I don't know if HubSpot has the exact same kind of offering, but like it's the whole piece of smart content and realizing that
HubSpot does not have the same offering for sure.
Doesn't have it. Okay.
No.
But like I said, it's making sure that that you understand that each, whether it's your like you said, the solutions pages, it really is them types of pages where they're looking either for more information on the product and how it works because it's maybe a new thing to the market, or it's just, okay, I want to book a demo. So like, I think really, really, really key piece there of understanding exactly where that customer's at in terms of that kind of product or, like you said, solution journey. Good.
So just to your point, HubSpot's key value proposition is when the leads are known, then it knows how to help you take the next step.
Right. Okay.
What I was talking about with Trendemon was helping you to deal with the traffic that are not yet converted, your anonymous visitors.
Yeah, HubSpot's more of a when they're in the funnel, then it's smart content from there on. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, makes sense. And look, I'd say over the last few years, it's been a relatively new thing to the market. I'd say, it's still, I think, coming on leaps and bounds, but with different B2B SaaS companies, and that's really CDP. And I know it doesn't play a role on every stack. I know it's not something that you guys use as like as a kind of core platform, but it has been something that's that has been rising over the last few years. With tools like Segment and all these different tools. So, how have you really how have you kind of really, I guess, created an alternative to a CDP platform? Because I know it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't play a role in every stack. So, I know you guys have got tools like ZoomInfo in place, and they've kind of been, I guess, you call it alternatives.
Absolutely. So ZoomInfo is definitely a software or a tool that we've used. We've tested out, acquiring the contacts, and testing the different personas. We've tried out acquiring the account names and segmenting that. Of course, once you have those account lists, you're then able to execute marketing strategies across multiple channels. You can execute that through your outbound program, through your email cadences. You can take those account lists and upload them to the likes of LinkedIn and execute paid campaigns there. Of course, there's other tools which I've been looking at where you can do literally dripped-based ABM on a person-to-person basis. Wow. Tools like Influ2. There really are some amazing tools out there, and you can definitely there's a lot of other ways to segment your audience once you've made the investment in gathering up the accounts and contacts that you want to reach out to.
So ZoomInfo for you guys is like that intent data tool that you're using to really segment them different types of potential leads that you would be going after.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So there would be contacts at that stage, and then once they've engaged, then eventually they would become a lead. But yeah, it's a great way to filter, because you don't, when you go into market, of course, it's not wise to go global. You should try and focus on specific geographies first. You know, if your podcast audience is in London, then they probably want to start with the English speaking world first. Start with the colonial countries all over the world. Start with time zones that you can support. It's not wise to go to market and close deals with every time zone, so you're overstretching your customer success team to work 24 hours a day. In the early stages, it's a burden that cracks really good companies. So be intentional, penetrate the market, and then move to your next market. So it's kind of test, validate, penetrate, stabilize, then move to the next one, and expand things sequentially rather than spray and pray
just
all
going
over the
everywhere.
world.
Yeah.
Which
And
is
that,
not what I would recommend.
And that makes complete sense. And I guess kind of go. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, when you use tools like LinkedIn Sales Navigator and you figure out who your persona is, you can literally type in the title, and then you can see the geographies in the world where that title exists. So you can see, for example, that the majority of your title are in places like North America. Sometimes it might be 50-60% of your addressable market is in North America. So it makes a lot of sense of why you might start somewhere like that, especially in B2B.
Yeah.
Especially in B2B.
One wrap-up question that I really do like asking, again, specifically for them kind of early stage founders, and it's quite a tough question, because it really has to make you kind of focus on just one metric. But look, in SaaS, we've got all these crazy metrics that we talk about, right? LTV, CAC, and MQL, SQL, all these different metrics. As a new founder, right, when you're first starting out, it can be quite an overwhelming, world for marketers to get into. So, what if there was one? Go ahead. Sorry.
It's a really tough question. I see where it's going already. I've been thinking about it for the past 2 minutes, and it's a tough question to finish on. Go ahead, finish your question, and then I'll answer.
Yeah, and if there was that, again, tough question. If there was that one metric that you had to track, that's really that one metric that allows you to kind of understand your customer better, if as a way of saying it, or really understand the kind of sales process of your customer, what would that one metric be? Tough question, I know.
It is a tough question, and I'm going to give you what I feel to be true. So I would say the key metric is different depending on which area of the company you belong to. The key sales metric is not the same as the key marketing metric. The key sales and marketing metric is not the same as the key customer metric, and it's not the same metric as product. So product are looking at product adoption. Customer success are looking not only at retention metrics, but they're looking at engagement. Also, a subset of product is they're looking at the amount of errors and tickets and all of that. So it gives you an indication of customer happiness, customer success, customer content. So how much are they using it? How often has it become part of their daily habit? And what is their experience of using it? Are they getting a lot of errors? If they are, let's prioritize them and group them by the frequency of those errors, so that we know what's causing the most pain, etc., etc. And also know which role or persona in your customer is experiencing that. Are we talking about end user? Are we talking about operational facilitator? Or are we talking about C-level? If your C-level is having a terrible time of it, chances are that you're going to get ripped out and replaced sooner rather than later. Amongst other things. So I think as a CEO, even though you want to have an answer which is one metric, it's not the appropriate answer. As a CEO, your job is to have each of your line of businesses report back to you on the key metrics that they should be tracking, reporting to you on a regular basis. That's your job as the CEO. It's not for you to have your hands in all the pies. Managing that is to get the right information for you to make decisions on. So when you think about marketing all the way to to sales and close deals it's one funnel, it's one journey. You can't take one snapshot from that and say that number in isolation. I'll give you an example of that. I worked at a company before now which had about 30+% MRR growth month over month. You know, a really positive number that would be invested in, but customer success had a really high churn rate. Right. It's close to 25% plus churn month over month.
Yeah.
So if you look at one metric without the other, it gives you a distorted picture.
Yeah.
So then in that situation, you need to understand maybe what type of customers are we acquiring, closing maybe prematurely, whereby from that source we have a high churn rate. Is it the source? Is it the methodology? Let's try and figure that out. Or is it purely the product? Or is it the onboarding process? Is it the setup of expectations? You have to look at the funnel end to end. If you look at
just one snapshot,
just a snapshot, you will make a bad leadership decision every single time.
Yeah, you have to.
Every single time. So I talked about attribution. I said, what was the first thing you do when you set up your stack? I said, deploy your marketing automation as a marketeer, and second step was deploy attribution, right? So the second thing that I said, and the reason is that you measure everything all of the time, and then you look for patterns, and you look for groupings.
Yeah.
So that when you have those issues, wherever it may be in the pipeline, you can look back and reverse engineer the whole of the pipeline to figure out exactly where your bottleneck is, or your problem, or your source is. And what do investors care about when, you said it was mostly your audience is early stage B2B companies. When you're drawing down your next investment round, it's not good enough just to show your revenue results or even your churn. You have to show that you have a scalable growth model.
Yeah.
So they will look at your cost of acquisition cost versus your average deal size, or your average lifetime value, and all of those metrics. And if you don't have them, you're not giving them faith that when they invest that money in you, that it's a sure thing, or that they can predict that this percentage return will come, and know the real value of that investment from their perspective.
Yeah.
So with everything, have the end point in mind of what am I doing this for, and where am I going with this? Be ready for that and plan for it. Measure everything so that you can report everything. You can make decisions based on data.
Again, jumping back to one point you made about, I think it was where you were kind of talking about the customer success side, and you were saying that sometimes it's the marketing that, like you said, prematurely passing the leads over, and then they're not the right fit. They don't quite fit the ICP. I think it's a really, really key point. You can say something. Yeah.
No, yeah. Sometimes salespeople close deals that are not really truly meant to be sold, and it just leads to churn. It happens in small companies. It happens in enterprise companies. It happens more often than it should. So absolutely, you need to know. You need to be able to recognize that earlier, because that can happen. That can drift on for a couple of years without anybody catching on to that.
Yeah, completely agree. Well, look, it's been really, really awesome having you on the show, Gideon. I'm sure my audience will really massively value your insights. So, like I said, you're definitely a marketing leader to follow in the space. And I think anyone that's listening to this show right now needs to go and check Gideon out, and just make sure that you really absorb what he's saying, because I think it's spot on with what we've talked about kind of over the podcast. So like I said, I hope you really enjoyed coming on, and guys, I will see you on the next episode of the CDP Growth Show. See ya.
I did. Thanks, Joseph.